It was Gil-galad, Elven King, and Elendil of Westerness who overthrew Sauron, though they themselves perished in the deed, and Isildur, Elendil's son, cut the ring from Sauron's hand and took it for his own. Greetings friends, Yoistin here, and I hope you all are doing well, wherever you are in Middle-earth. Today we will be discussing the history of Isildur, son of Elendil and High King of Arnor and Gondor in the late Second Age and early Third Age. While I was originally planning to make a part 1 and part 2 of this history, I think I can cover Isildur's history all in one video. Thank you all for joining me today. Let's begin our tale about this tragic hero. Born in the year 3209 of the Second Age, Isildur was the elder brother of Anarion and the son of Elendil, the last lord of Andúnië in Númenor. This lineage was descended from the kings of Númenor, thus they were also descendants of Elros, Eärendil, and so forth, but they were not the kings of the island, as the line of succession deemed it was so. Isildur was tall, like the other men of Númenor, standing somewhere around 7 feet, and he had dark hair and brown eyes. He was born during the late years of Númenor, as far as the history of the island is concerned, and his group of kin were known as the Faithful, for they were still friendly with the elves and were loyal to the Valar and Ilúvatar himself. For more about the history of the island, I'll link a video that I made about Númenor in the description and cards above. The darkening of Númenor would come after King Ar-Pharazôn captured Sauron in Middle-earth and brought him to the island in 3262, and with him would come a great and final darkness upon the island. During Isildur's time in Númenor, he would marry, and the couple would produce their first son Elendil in 3299. While it seems that Isildur had a good start to his life on the island, it would soon worsen. The Dark Lord, who was supposed to be a prisoner, would become an advisor to King Ar-Pharazôn, and the island would begin to fall. Isildur would come to learn that Sauron wanted Ar-Pharazôn to cut down Nimloth the Fair, the White Tree of Númenor. This tree was a direct descendant of Galathilion of Tirion, a gift from Yavanna to the elves whose bearing resembled Telperion, the silver tree of the two that had once given light to Valinor. Isildur could not allow for the symbol of divinity to be destroyed, and its line ended. So at night, and in a disguise, Isildur snuck to the tree in the king's court, where it was under heavy guard, and though Isildur would be forced to fight and sustain almost mortal wounds, he was able to bear the fruit of the white tree away, along with his life. But for a time Isildur was near death, until the fruit of the tree began to sprout, and he awoke and healed. Even though Nimloth was destroyed, its lineage would live on in Middle-earth. When the end of Númenor was nigh, and Ar-Pharazôn prepared the great armament that would sail against the Valar and Valinor, Elendil and his house prepared for a voyage of their own, but they would head east instead of west. There were 9 ships, 4 for Elendil, 3 for Isildur, and 2 for Anarion. The Palantíri, Ring of Barahir, Narsil, Scepter of Annúminas, Elendilmir, and Stone of Arak were all borne by these ships, and upon one of Isildur's ships, the sapling of the White Tree was heavily protected. And then, the downfall of Númenor came in 3319, and even as Ar-Pharazôn and his men would meet their ends upon the shores of Aman, and Sauron would drown with the island as Ilúvatar reshaped the world, the faithful men upon their 9 ships came out of the west and into Middle-earth from the Sea of Belagar. Elendil and his ships would be taken by the sea and winds to Lindon and Eriador, and he would establish the realm of Arnor. The 5 ships of Isildur and his brother Anarion would go to the south part of Middle-earth, and they would sail their ships up the Anduin River, and they would establish the Kingdom of Gondor. Anarion, whose name is derived from the Quenya word for sun, founded Menas Anor, the Tower of the Sun, upon the White Mountains looking east, and Isildur, whose name is derived from the Quenya word for moon, founded Menas Ithil, the Tower of the Moon, upon the Mountains of Shadow, looking west. In between those 2 cities would be Osgiliath, the capital of Gondor, and in each of these cities Palantíri were set. The sapling of the White Tree was planted thusly in Minas Ithil, and it would be the first White Tree of Gondor. The 2 brothers would jointly rule Gondor from Osgiliath, even though Elendil was the High King of both Arnor and Gondor, and he delegated the rule of the latter kingdoms to his sons. Isildur and his wife would also have 2 more sons, Eraton in 3339 and Cirion in 3379. After Gondor was established, Isildur would place the Stone of Arak in the Blackroot Vale south of the White Mountains, and the men of the mountains would come to the stone. It is there that they swore an oath to Isildur and to Gondor, that if Sauron was to return, they would help the Dunedain fight against his evil. And indeed, Sauron had returned to Middle-earth, unbeknownst to the men of the West. In 3320, the same year that the kingdoms of Gondor and Arnor were established, the spirit of Sauron endured, and he returned to Mordor, likely carrying the ring upon his spirit. In 3429, Sauron had regained much of his strength that had been lost, and he attacked and captured Minas Ithil, the city of Isildur, and he burned the White Tree. Isildur, however, had escaped with his family and a seedling of the White Tree. There was still hope for the west. The man took his family upon a boat down the Anduin and sailed for Lindon to meet with Gil-galad and his father Elendil in the north, while Anarion and his forces would hold Osgiliath and Gondor against Sauron, buying time for the free peoples to muster. It's at this time that I believe Isildur returned to the Stone of Adak and called upon the men of the mountain to fulfill their oath. When they came, however, they refused to fight against Sauron, and Isildur cursed them for breaking their oath, never allowing them to find peace or rest until they fulfill their oath at long last. These men became the Oathbreakers, the dead men of Dunharrow. Isildur would then go north to regroup with the elves and men of that land, and in 3430 of the Second Age, the last alliance would be formed. In that same year, Valandil, the final son of Isildur, would be born. The men of Arnor and the elves of Lindon would go to Imladris, Rivendell, in 3431 to regroup, plan, and make ready for the War of the Last Alliance. Isildur would go off with his kin and friends to aid his brother in the south and defeat Sauron, and he would leave his wife and son Valandil in Rivendell until his return. Elendil, Isildur's eldest son, would accompany his father in Mordor during the war, while his brothers Eraton and Cirion would claim and hold Minas Ithil against Sauron's forces. The war was fought until 3441, and after the Battle of Dagorlad and the Siege of Barad-dûr that lasted 7 years, Isildur took up the hilt shard of Narsil, the sword of his slain father Elendil, and cut the One Ring from Sauron's finger. Although Gil-galad, Elendil, and Anarion had all met their ends, the West was victorious, and Isildur had the opportunity to destroy Sauron's ring and end his menace forever. But Isildur went against the advice of Elrond and Círdan the Shipwright, and he took the ring for himself as a wurgild for the deaths of his father and brother. Isildur returned to Gondor and took up the Star of Elendil, or the Elendilmere, star-shaped white gems upon mithril fillets. He was the new and final High King of both Arnor and Gondor until Aragorn, but he would allow his nephew, Meneldil, the son of Anarion, to rule Gondor in his stead, while he went north. Isildur would plant the new sapling of the White Tree in Minas Anor in reverence of his brother Anarion, and it would last for many centuries. Isildur and his nephew, as well as their trusted friends, went on to establish Aman Anwar, the tomb of King Elendil in the south, and Isildur wrote the Scroll of Isildur, detailing his new prize, the One Ring. Within the scroll he bound the fate of his house to the ring. He spoke as to how it came to him, and he also transcribed the inscription of the ring while it was hot. Once Meneldil was established in Gondor and Isildur was ready to depart northwards, he took his eldest 3 sons and a company of men with him. He went to the Gladden fields, planning to cross the Misty Mountains and come to Imladris for his wife and son that he had left there before the War of the Last Alliance many years before. Believing that his men were safe, and that the armies of the great enemy were defeated, Isildur left his camp unguarded, but orcs of the Misty Mountains ambushed them. Knowing that the battle was imminent, Isildur sent his esquire and another companion to hasten to Rivendell with the shards of Narsil, and likely also with the Ring of Barahir. During the disaster of the Gladden Fields on October 5th of the second year of the Third Age, Eraton and Cirion would be slain, and Elendil persuaded his father to put on the One Ring, to disappear, and to leave while he was able. Elendil would fall as he led the rest of the men against their attackers, and Isildur would fly, going to the Anduin and attempting to swim across the river. But the orcs could still smell him and hunted him with that sense. The ring would then betray Isildur while he swam, as it fell off of his finger, revealing him to the orcs. The High King felt a tremendous sense of loss, and then a great relief after he lost the One Ring, before he was slain by orc archers. Isildur, son of Elendil, was then lost to the river, but he would leave many legacies behind. The One Ring would be known as Isildur's Bane, for it led the man to his doom. Isildur's line would pass on through his youngest and only remaining son Valandil, who had lived on in Rivendell. He and his descendants would become the kings of Arnor, while his cousin and his descendants would be the kings of Gondor, until the end of that lineage. Aragorn would hail from the line of Valandil, and he would reunite the kingdoms of Gondor and Arnor as the next High King of them both. Isildur and Anarion would also be remembered in the Argonath, the pillars of the kings that resembled their likeness. Finally, something that is most interesting about Isildur's death is that Saruman would go on to recover the chain that Isildur wore the One Ring upon, as well as the original Star of Elendil, or Elendilmere from the Anduin River. He would recover these artifacts while he was looking for the One Ring in the later part of the Third Age. Sauron had kept these things behind a hidden door in a steel closet in Isengard, until Aragorn and Gimli had found them. It is possible that the White Wizard had also found the remains of Isildur and destroyed them as well, for it is unclear where exactly Isildur's body had gone in the Anduin after his death. If such items were recovered, his body would have likely found shallow water. But so ends the tale of Isildur, son of Elendil and the High King of Arnor and Gondor. While he was a good and valiant man, his greed had brought his end. Thus is the moral lesson of today's story depicted. We must nurture our own virtues and grow strong against our darkest temptations, for no matter how valiant or strong we are, we must not allow hubris or greed to take hold of our nature. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope you all enjoyed today's episode. If you did, please be sure to hit that like button and share this with a friend. Let me know your thoughts about Isildur in the comments below. I think Isildur is a very interesting and remarkable character whose actions shaped an age of Middle-earth's history. Also, please be sure to check out our music channel, Facebook, Twitter, and merch in the description below. For our Discord server and podcast where we talk about all of the recent Lord of the Rings news, consider donating to our Patreon. Links for all of those are in the description below. Finally, don't forget to subscribe and hit that bell button to join the Men of the West and all of the Free Peoples today, and I'll see you all again next week with a video on the Hobbits of Middle-earth. As always, guys, thank you all so much for joining me on this adventure. Until the next one, my great friends.